what appears to be a reference to the Papadopoulos story, the president tweeting in part, quote, "Lose all of your phony and non-existent sources and treat the president of the United States fairly." For more on all of this, let's bring in the panel. Matthew Miller is an MSNBC justice and security analyst, also former Justice Department spokesman to President Obama. Natasha Bertrand is a political correspondent for Business Insider. And Ned Price is an MSNBC national security analyst. He is also a former NSC spokesperson under President Obama. Matt, let me start with you. President Trump, is he asking the DOJ to investigate Jim Comey?
He appears to be. You know, a little bit of deja vu here, Craig. It's not the first time, or even I think even the second or third time that we've had to discuss the president calling on the Justice Department to go after his political opponents. It's no less inappropriate, no less dangerous for him to do it now just because he's done it before. And I think the worrisome thing is the cumulative effect of these constant tweets and these calls by the president in interviews and in other places for the Justice Department to investigate Hillary Clinton or Hillary Clinton's aides or now Jim Comey. Because what you see, two things. One, the Justice Department bends to his will in some cases. We've seen that before when, for example, the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General signed off on the firing of Jim Comey under false pretenses, or when the Attorney General started to look into whether there should be a special prosecutor to investigate this Uranium One deal that was left over from the Obama administration. There's this problem where the department might bend, but then there's the larger problem that the American public starts to lose faith in the credibility of our institutions that guarantee the rule of law. That's a corrosive effect that could have ramifications not just during the Trump administration, but for years to come.
Ned, a week earlier, the president told the Times reporter this in regard to the Hillary Clinton email investigation, quote, "I have absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department, but for purposes of hopefully thinking I'm going to be treated fairly, I've stayed uninvolved with this particular matter." Bluster, or do you think that he'll try to exercise that power?
Well, Craig, I think we've already seen indications that President Trump won't be able to keep his hands off this investigation when it comes to Uranium One. He's already voiced his input into that investigation, releasing material that was previously held private by an FBI source involved in that matter. But look, I think the broader point of all of this is that these are not the words of a president. The tweet this morning was not the words of a president. They were the words of a man who was running scared, scared from an independent FBI and Department of Justice. And so the question becomes, why does President Trump feel the need to be so hands-on, not only in this investigation, but also in other investigations? And it suggests to me that President Trump feels that he has something to hide. And if you add that with the other data points from the firing of Jim Comey to the attempt to get his top national security aides to claim there was no collusion, it paints a picture of just that. Not only potential collusion, but also certainly what appears to be obstruction of justice.
I want to throw Trump's Comey tweet back up on the screen here for you guys. Natasha, let me ask you about this here. As you can see at the end of that, he refers to the deep state Justice Department. And I think a lot of folks continue to find it odd that the president refers to this deep state Justice Department when you look at Jeff Sessions, you look at Rod Rosenstein, you look at Christopher Wray. These are all Trump appointees. Can you be a Trump appointee and still be a part of the deep state?
Well, this is a talking point that is really prevalent in the Fox News world. They all accuse the Justice Department of essentially working to, or members of the Justice Department, agents, FBI agents, of working to overthrow the Trump presidency. They say that a coup is taking place, that Mueller is actually leading. And so for him to come out and say this is all a deep state operation is essentially his way of completely delegitimizing the probe. And for him to say, you know, Comey should possibly be in jail or be investigated is another really problematic statement because, of course, Comey has a ton of information that could incriminate the president as this investigation moves forward. Comey, of course, was the one who told Congress earlier this year that President Trump asked for his loyalty. He told Congress that Trump asked him to drop the investigation into Michael Flynn. So for him now to come out and say on Twitter that he thinks that Comey should be investigated is something that I'm sure his lawyers did not want him to do.
Matt, Ned, you guys both spent some time in the upper echelons of government. I'll give you an opportunity here to speak the truth. Are you part of the deep state?
I guess a former member of the deep state. Look, David Frum, the conservative writer, I think said something very that I thought was very appropriate on Twitter this morning, which is when you see the president talk about deep state, think about the rule of law, because when he talks about the deep state, that's what he means are people that are committed to the rule of law, people that swore an oath to the Constitution and not to the President of the United States. And so when you see him railing against people in the intelligence community, in the Justice Department, it's because he's angry that these are people that won't bend to his will, that won't do the kind of inappropriate things that he wants them to do, but instead will follow the path that, you know, the Constitution and the rule of law demands of them.
The president appears to be referring to this big-time story over the weekend, of course, the Papadopoulos story. Sources telling the Times it was George Papadopoulos whose loose talk over drinks with his foreign diplomat led to the FBI's Russia investigation, that it was Papadopoulos who was actually the impetus. As NBC News Today points out, this is the third time that we know of that the Trump family or campaign team had interactions with Russia or WikiLeaks, the other two times being contacts with Donald Trump Jr. First read today, pointing out that, quote, cooperation without collusion is still cooperation. What do you say to that, Ned?
Well, I think that's right, Craig. I mean, I think what we have learned, not only from the Papadopoulos story, but from the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Don Trump Jr.'s outreach to WikiLeaks, and with all that we don't know, that at the very least there was an attempt by the Russian government to meet and to collude with the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign showed extreme interest in that prospect, with Don Trump Jr. famously saying, "If it's what you say it is, I love it." And so I think at the very least the key ingredients were there. Now the question then becomes just how successful was the Trump campaign in all of this. To be sure, this was not the most talented or agile group, so it's certainly possible that their very genuine and concerted desire to collude or cooperate with the Russians didn't get off the ground. But Craig, all of the ingredients were there. We know smoke is there, and Mueller and his team are now looking at is there any fire? And I think that question remains unknown as of yet, at least.
Natasha, Papadopoulos' reported statements to that Australian diplomat came about 2 months before the president, then candidate Trump, famously said this on the campaign trail. Take a listen.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Should we be viewing those comments differently now? Should we be looking at those comments through a different lens?
Absolutely. As of right now, we have no evidence that Papadopoulos told the Trump campaign that he had met with this London professor who had told him that the Russians had this dirt in the form of Hillary Clinton emails. However, it would be very, very unlikely that he would go drinking with an Australian diplomat and kind of start bragging about the fact that he had this information and not then go back to the Trump campaign, who he was trying so hard to impress over the course of several months with that very same information. So the idea that he may have told some high-level officials on the campaign, and he was actually taken very seriously in the early months when he first got there, that Trump would have not known about this, or that someone high level would not have known about this, is very unlikely.
Natasha Bertrand, always good to have you. And Matthew and Ned, it's good to hear that you are not part of the deep state. Thank you for clearing that up.
Reformed.
Conducting major U.S. foreign policy on Twitter. The real consequences the president's tweets are having around the world. Also, I had a long to-do list for lawmakers as they